On an overcast day in London, a man paddled out to sea. John Darwin's life was going in the wrong direction. He didn't know where it went wrong for him. As the bills and debt piled up, it became clear that he wasn't going to dig his family out of this hole. His wife and 2 children depended on him to make it right, to fix their lives. As he rowed, he could only think of one way to help. He simply just vanished. Anne Darwin was 17 years old when her future husband popped into her work. John knew he wanted her to be his from the first time he laid eyes on her. He flirted with her day in and day out, and even though she denied him several times, there was just something about this man she couldn't ignore. John was well educated and studying to become a teacher. He was also a determined man who didn't take no for an answer. He continued to ask her out until, eventually, Anne agreed. 4 years later, John asked her hand in marriage, and she happily accepted. Their lives went in a pretty standard direction. In 1975 and 1978, they had their 2 children, Mark and Anthony. Anne loved being a mother and having a family, but not everything was perfect. While John was never a horrible husband, Anne referred to him as overbearing. He always had to be right and would argue about everything. Either you did what John wanted, or you debated him on the subject. Even with these struggles, he still wanted to give himself and his family a good life. John was always a determined man who used his mind to get what he wanted. John got the teaching career he sought after. He got the girl he longed for, but he wanted more. The ambitious man was never happy with where he was, always looking for his next moment in the spotlight. Impressing people was vital to John, and he posted about himself and his family on an early social media site called Friends Reunited. He wanted praise for his education, achievements, and real estate portfolio. John needed more out of life and wanted others to know it. Over the years, he tried multiple ventures such as snail breeding and garden gnome crafting, but these didn't turn out to be the cash cows he believed they'd be. He picked up another job working as a nighttime prison guard, but his ambitions were always set to loftier heights. His biggest get-rich-quick idea was to become a real estate mogul. He wanted to build an empire out of turning properties into cheap communal homes called bedsits. He borrowed way too much money over the years and plunged his family into crippling debt. In the end, they owed a staggering £700,000 and had no way out. Or did they? On a calm day where the North Sea was quieter than ever, John set out in his kayak and did not plan on returning. No one knew where he was. Well, no one except his wife, that is. His whole plan was to fake his death to collect the life insurance money and pension payments, but he needed someone he could trust to help him. So he filled Anne in on the scheme, making her his accomplice. Anne initially argued against the idea, but remember, John was always right. He told her he'd only be gone for 2 weeks. Once the life insurance check cleared, they'd have the money to get out of debt. She later stated that his 2-week timeline was the only reason she agreed to this outlandish plan. She would have never done it if she knew where it would eventually lead. This first step was about to lead Anne down a road paved in deception, and there was no way back. When Darwin didn't show up for a shift at the prison, it caused a stir. Shortly after, Anne reported him missing. Police pulled a massive search effort together to find the husband and father of 2. A search that would later be described as looking for a needle in 100 haystacks. The Coast Guard had 2 teams searching, and the police had a plane with thermal imaging making passes. There were helicopters and people on lifeboats. In all, this wild goose chase cost over £100,000. The wreckage of his kayak washed up on shore along with his broken paddle, further selling the story of his death. After an exhaustive search, they called it off and delivered the news to what they believed to be a distraught wife. Anne enacted the beginning of their plan perfectly and sold herself as a wife who'd lost her husband. She even told a local newspaper, "All I want to do is bury his body." Luckily for the pair, Mark and Anthony were grown and living their own lives, so they were easy to fool. Anne broke the news to her children, and they believed they'd never see their father again. Anne had a death certificate issued in 2003, allowing her to collect the insurance money. However, John's 2-week timeline stretched into the following months, and things went south for the couple. John spent the early part of his afterlife at home with his wife. During the day, he had to stay hidden in an adjacent flat that you could access through a hidden door in their wardrobe. At night, he would come back through to be with Anne. Unfortunately, dying did nothing for John's ego, and he became bored reading internet articles and newspapers all day. Life in John's Narnia wasn't all it cracked up to be. He put on a disguise, grew a beard, and adopted a limp so he could go outside again. One of his tenants even recognized him and asked, "Aren't you supposed to be dead?" John told him not to tell anyone. When questioned about it later, the tenant said he didn't want to get involved. He was seen again by a fisherman in 2005 who claimed John was going by John Williams. Tired of sneaking around, the Darwins moved abroad in 2004 and began looking for a home out of the country. Since a dead man can't apply for a passport, John came up with a clever alias, John Jones. The couple was looking at multiple places in Cyprus and Gibraltar before eventually settling in Panama. The strain this double unstable life put on Anne caused her to become distant from her husband. She had lost interest in her partner, and he looked elsewhere to get what he wanted. John took to the internet and met a woman from Kansas. The affair grew far beyond an internet fling, and the not-so-dead man flew to the U.S. to pursue her. However, it didn't work out, and we assume this mistress from Kansas didn't have a thing for ghosts. In 2006, John and Anne went to Panama together and purchased a property through an agency specializing in helping foreigners. The agency took a picture of the two and posted it on their website, a snapshot that will be very important later on. Between 2006 and 2007, the Darwins flew back and forth between the UK and Panama as they tried to bring John's bedsit business back from the dead. Finally, Anne sold their home in the UK while John waited in Panama. She got almost £300,000 for the house before heading back to her husband. But all the sneaking around was catching up to John, and changing visa laws in Panama were sure to expose him for who he was. After 5 long years, Mr. Darwin only wanted to see his children again. John knew he couldn't just come back and start living his life as if nothing happened. So he came up with an original plan that was sure to work. Fake amnesia. With this shining gem of a strategy, on December 1st, 2007, John waltzed into a London police station. He told them he believed he was a missing person and had no memory of the past 5 years. Unfortunately for John, the police had already opened an investigation into his odd disappearance. After several witnesses claimed to have seen the ghost of John Darwin, the police suspected foul play. John's amnesia story only dug him a deeper grave. Anne was interviewed and asked how she felt about his return. Once again, she went for the Oscar and she said she was overjoyed at seeing him again. Meanwhile, investigators followed their financial trail to Panama, where they found irrefutable evidence. Remember that snapshot from before? The Daily Mirror found the picture the agency took of them and published it. With proof the Darwins had been living a secret life in Panama, their scheme completely unraveled. John was arrested at his son's Anthony's house and charged with making untrue statements and obtaining life insurance money by deception. The next day, Anne came back from another trip to Panama and was arrested before she could leave the airport. The total amount stolen had been reported a little differently, but between all the insurance policies and pensions, the Darwins defrauded a minimum of £500,000. They both faced several charges of receiving money by deception, and John also had a charge related to his fake passport. On July 23, 2008, they were convicted of their crimes. John got 6 years and 3 months, while Anne got 6 years and 6 months. They both tried to appeal their case, but were denied for obvious reasons. Authorities recovered all the money that the two frauds took by selling off the properties they purchased and seizing their bank accounts. John got out of prison in January of 2011, while Anne was released in March of the same year. The Darwins were criminals, but their targets were not the traditional innocent victims typical of these stories. They scammed an insurance company and pension plans that ultimately got their money back. The real victims of this ridiculous scheme were their children. Not only did Mark and Anthony believe their father was dead, but they were lied to for 5 years and inevitably dragged through the court of public opinion once John turned up again. The men were hurt, and they refused to speak to their parents ever again. They even testified against them in court, and said they wouldn't even look at her in a later interview. Thankfully, authorities didn't bring charges against Mark and Anthony. All reputable reports agree that they had no idea what their parents were doing. At the beginning of this story, all John wanted to do was save his family. In the end, he destroyed it. He and Anne may never speak to their children again. Click here to watch one of these next videos.